You're good, Lauren? I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please read the statement?
This is the meeting of the Township Council for Monday, July 24th, 2017. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public and the press on January 5th, 2017, and was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-2.
Roll call?
Councilmember Kadesh?
Here.
Councilmember Ooms? Councilmember Rizzuto?
Here.
Councilmember Wetzel?
Here.
Council President Murphy.
Here. Please rise to salute the flag. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, we have a couple presentations. I'd like to have a motion if we could move the presentations before public session.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? First on the agenda, we have Brian Decker. Brian, if you wouldn't mind just stepping up, just give us a little, you can have a seat, a little overview of septic systems, and then if council members have any questions,
Okay.
have a seat, be comfortable.
Where would you like me to start? You have questions you want me to address first, or?
Well, I guess maybe just starting with, let's just say the process of, we can just use a home sale.
Okay.
The selling of a home and the process of what happens, because you're quite involved in many of them.
All right, somebody sells their house. The buyer of this house now hires a home inspector and a septic inspector. Okay, and that's pretty much requirements of their mortgage company usually.
And the septic inspector is separate and licensed.
Yes, he has his own license. He does really just inspections. I do not do inspections because like a conflict of interest because I'm in a repair business. I mean, some people do, but I just, I don't do that. And most of those guys are just licensed inspectors. They have the cameras and everything else. So they send the cameras out the pipe. They give you pictures, videos, everything. They really don't have to dig the yard up most of the time. They send it out of the tanks, out of the pipes, whatever. So they give you a whole full report from start to finish. So they go there, they send their camera from the house out to the tank. They'll find the tank, open up the tank. Some of them pump the tank, some of them don't. If there's like a question that the tank is a little low or something, then they do pump it to see what the problem was. If not, they'll probably not pump the tank, because a lot of people complain that they just spent $200 a little while ago to pump their tank and now it's getting done again. So from that point, they'll send the camera out to find what's there for a leach field. If it goes out to a field, there's a box, or some of the old seepage pits are out there. And they usually go in the basement to see if it has a separate gray water system. And I think that's what the big issue is now. Gray water is usually laundry and kitchen sink. That's what gray water is typically. Sometimes people add their water softener to that, or, people do something down the road that was illegal in the house. They tied something else in it. But normally it's laundry and kitchen sink is gray water. What the problem is with the gray water is if that pipe leaves the house and goes right to a seepage pit, which is a concrete perforated tank, it's not a solid tank, okay? It's perforated with stone around it. That's like the disposal area for the gray water. That's considered a cesspool. If it has a solid tank before it to catch the soap scum and the solids and all that, it's not a cesspool. That's a regular working septic then, okay? So that's the definition of a cesspool. If it does not have that tank ahead of it to collect the soap scum and grease or whatever.
And so if you just have a seepage pit and it fails, and you have, let's say, regardless of what system you have, so if the seepage pit fails, what happens then? How can it be replaced? What are the regulations by the DEP?
Well, let me back up. If you have the solid tank and then that seepage pit for gray water, that is a conforming system, so you can leave that, okay, as long as it's working good. But if that gray water pit is now full, even though you have a tank ahead of it, they do not let you repair seepage pits
They don't let you do stone replacements anymore?
No. And this came into effect April 2nd of 2012. They said seepage pits are now non-conforming.
Right.
Okay, the only time we can use a seepage pit on a black water system, which is your toilets and everything else, is if we put a treatment system ahead of it,
Right.
which are these new coconut fiber things, the aeration things, there's peat moss things, and what they do is they filter the septic water before it goes to the seepage pit. And the reason for doing that is a 1,000-gallon seepage pit is 6 foot tall. Okay, your pipe goes in the top, it's 6 foot deep. Any place around here you dig 6, 8, 10 feet down, you're into groundwater pretty much. So what you're doing is you're putting raw septic water right into the groundwater with no filtration there, no treatment. So that's why the DEP said no more seepage pits.
But with a seepage pit, let's just say you had the seepage pit and you had a solids tank with it, and it failed. And you cannot do a stone replacement, and you wanted to keep the system that same, you would have to go through all the engineering and the cost, which
Right.
is, I guess, years ago, prior to 2012, the cost could have been minimal compared to today. It may have been a couple thousand versus,
Well, back in the day, we could do stone changes. That was $4,000 or $5,000 for a stone change.
Right.
Now, typically, every system is probably $17,000 to $22,000. And if you do a treatment system, it's probably $25,000 to $30,000. All right, so if you have that seepage pit that is failing, you can usually save your septic tank, but from that point out, it gets replaced. The engineer now calls the health department. We come out, we dig test holes to see what the soil conditions are. So based on the soil conditions, based on where your well is, property lines, how much room you have, the engineer now draws up a septic design to put in a new leach field to replace that seepage pit.
so if you just have a seepage pit, they'll still allow you to put a solids tank in? Or do they try to make you tie it into your system if it's large enough, but if it's not large enough, you then have to replace the whole system?
Right. If your system, we've run into this, that some of the Blackwater systems have been upgraded in the last 10 years, okay? Which meant they had a seepage pit that failed or whatever, so now they put a leach field in. The engineer came in, designed this leach field for a full 3-bedroom house, say, okay? They didn't disconnect the gray water, because at the time they were illegal. So you left that gray water connected to take as much water as it possibly could, knowing that when it failed down the road, it could be tied into that new system. Okay, so that is a conforming size field, say 800 square foot for a 3-bedroom house.
Right.
You would be allowed to tie it in that. But what we find, if you have just a seepage pit out there, or some of the old leach fields are very small, you got, 300 square foot leach field, that's nowhere big enough to tie in that extra gray water. So now you need the engineer to do a full-blown design to tie both of these systems together into one field. The other option is if you have the gray water cesspool without a tank ahead of it, the DEP will let you put a tank ahead of it if your soil conditions permit, okay? And that seepage pit is working good. If the seepage pit has failed, then they say no, upgrade it, make it a conforming system. But if the pit is still working good, they will not let you move the pit. But if you have room between the pit and the house to squeeze a tank in there, they will let you put a tank in. If you get an engineer, dig a test hole next to the pit and make sure that you have below the bottom of that pit 4 foot of good soil with no ledge and no water table.
And your cost for engineering?
That's not a full-blown design, so you're probably at $1,500, $2,000,
And if it's a full-blown design?
around $2,500 to $3,000. That's
On top
engineering
of
and
the,
permits.
on
Yeah.
top of the
Yes.
cost for the septic?
And honestly, we've tried a few times to add a tank ahead of these seepage pits, and most of the time it does not work out because you don't have 4 foot of good soil below it. Because that seepage pit is usually a 500-gallon pit, which is 3 foot tall, okay? Usually it's 2 foot in the ground, so you're already 5 foot in the ground. So you need to now go another 4 foot below that with no ledge, no water table, no modeling even, which, indicates water table at the highest water table time of the year.
I shared with you an email that we received, basically that came from, and Councilmember Rizzuto and I received an email that was basically some information that came from a DEP. And could you tell me, was that information in to your,
It's really not correct from what I'm running through with the health department every day. See, what that said is, yes, they'll allow you to put the tank ahead of it. They make it say, yes, you can do it, but you have to meet all those requirements, and that's, around here, you never meet these requirements, that's the problem. Like I said, now you're digging a 9-foot deep hole with no ledge, no water table, no modeling. 95% of the time, that doesn't happen around here. If you're down maybe Jersey Shore where it's all sand, yes. But our conditions up here are not.
so when we have these, when we're in these, having these issues up here, even though maybe South Jersey has septic problems, or their use of septics is down there, they're not coming into the same problems that we are faced up
Right.
here because of our.
They're
because
getting
of-
away with putting a tank ahead of it and probably works fine. We
And
don't
it's-
have the soil conditions that permit us to do that, that's the
Right.
problem.
But the regulations were just set across New Jersey, that, as if everybody
Yes.
was the same.
Yes.
But from my estimation, and not that I'm a mind reader of whatever the DEP was saying, is that the information, it almost sounds to me from that email, is that the information that they're giving out, that they're not understanding their regulations. And I'm just asking you if that's,
I would agree with that, yeah, because what you showed me on that letter said that, yeah, we'll allow you to put a tank ahead of it, but it doesn't happen, we end up wasting the people's money going out digging holes, getting the engineer, and 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to put a tank in there.
So a lot of times, a lot of these agencies, they're saying, oh, we're not stopping you, we're not making you put a septic in.
Yes.
However, once they get to you, who is actually the installer and to the engineer, we're finding out that it's not that easy.
Exactly. Yep.
And it delays, a lot. And as far as between repairs, and I know this is what you do pretty much full-time, right? I mean, between repairs and replacements, are you seeing more replacements? Are you seeing more repairs? I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
probably definitely more replacements.
More
The repairs we're
replacements.
doing now are only like a tank replacement or putting in a new distribution box, little things like that. We can't even do any kind of repair in a leach field anymore. Like, we can do a D-box in a leach field, and that's it. Beyond that, we need an engineer now. So I'm sure you've seen some of the septic inspection reports that say some of the laterals have back pitch maybe, or the lateral has a sag in it. Well, we used to be able to go through, uncover the stone, lift up the laterals, get the right pitch back on them, add a little stone, whatever we need to do. That was all under repair permit, and that was fine. Now the new DEP regulation is, me as a contractor, any contractor, can't do anything in the leach field without an engineer present. The engineer has to witness everything, and then the engineer has to certify that the leach field is in good working condition. And what they make them do is dig down through the stone and make sure there's not a biomat in the field, that the field is getting close to failing or to the point that it's not working.
right. And what about the systems that do not have any seepage pits or tanks with them, but they're pretty much, I just want to talk about like the leach fields. I mean, what are you coming across with that?
They're 50/50. Most, I think, of the fields are passing. Well, say if they're newer fields, what we're finding is a lot of D-boxes deteriorate, little things like that we can do a repair on. The other problem we're finding a lot of is remember the DEP code change in 1990 when they went to select fill? A ton of those fields are failing because of select fill, which was a DEP regulation with such a fine sand that it's all clogging up now.
There was a particular neighborhood, I think, that happened.
It's all the neighborhoods now. We're running.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say back then it was because I know that they were not lasting, it was like maybe 10 years, and then they needed to replace the
Yes,
field.
Yes,
And if you, yeah, all right,
there's a bunch of them now.
yeah. So even though the system, it was just, and do they do that anymore? Have they stopped doing that?
Yeah, they kind of backed off on it, and then in this new code change, April 2nd of 2012, they went back to it again.
Okay.
So, 10 years down the road, we're going to have a bunch of failures again because they're right back into that select fill.
Okay. Because what I'd like to do is, really bring some of this information back to the senator's office who was looking into this, because maybe there's, maybe now that they're seeing what we're really going through, like I said, because maybe they're trying to model it off of South Jersey and not really ever coming up here, and knowing what's
Come up
happening.
here and see the small lake communities we're working in where there's no room, that seepage pits were great for that. And, that they will allow us to do the seepage pits still if we put this treatment system in front of them, which is $9,000 to buy a treatment system.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Pat, do you have any questions?
I don't know why I have no question. I don't even know why, I thank Mr. Decker for coming and bringing this to us, but I don't know what the purpose of this is.
Well, actually, I think it was more of an educational purpose because.
Because I happen to say that based upon a comment that we heard from the senator's office, that it wasn't the state that was requiring replacement of leach septic systems, it was banks and mortgage companies.
Well-
And you took it upon yourself to prove me wrong. I really don't care one way or the other. The issue was that if the septic system is in good working order, and there is no gray water tank, and there is no cesspool, that there's no reason to change simply because you're changing ownership. That's the information that I was given, and that's the information that I expressed. You chose to take issue with that. The issue now becomes whether or not there was a cesspool or a gray water tank, which are no longer permitted. I understood that. I understand that, and that was part of the information given to me by the senator's office. So other than that, I don't know what kind of an issue is involved.
So-
Certainly, every residence on its own has particular issues involved with it, those with smaller lot sizes, those with extensive leach fields, those that have poor percolability, but I was just simply talking about whether or not it was the state making that a requirement or the requirement of a mortgage company or a bank before approving a mortgage transfer. That's all.
And you were simply told that it was the mortgage company based on the fact that the DEP will say, we're not requiring you to replace your septic. Or the health department will say, we're not going to make you replace the septic. However, when a licensed inspector goes in and does the test, they must submit that failed report to the health department. And the health department, from my knowledge, they'll go out and they'll actually check the home, because I've had owners tell me they've received a visit from the inspector from the health inspector, because their septic failed. Now, when I decided to ask Mr. Decker to come here, it was not to, by any means, insult you. It was really for educational purposes, and it's really, I don't know if there's anybody in here that does not find it helpful. It's sad that you find it to not be helpful, but because I think...
Sad that you were following in my footsteps when going right over there and asking these questions, but of course you have every right to do so.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And actually, I'm doing a community service by making sure that the people are aware of this, because it's not good to have misinformation out there. And it's actually, I don't think we've ever had anybody actually come and do this, so it's important for the people in Vernon, and probably in Sussex County, to understand what is happening, because it does affect the sale of their homes if they're trying to get out. They may not have the money to be able... Have you ever come across that, where people just say, hey, I just don't have the money?
Yeah, probably 90% of what I do, I get paid at closing.
Right, and being
Some
paid
of
at
those people
closing...
don't even have the money at closing either.
Correct. It's like they don't have the money, they're doing payments to you, or they're doing it at closing because they don't have the money to put up front. So they're hoping that they have some equity out of the home, so they're sometimes walking away with nothing or writing a check. But I think it's important for everybody to understand that this is not just happening to one person. It's not any town in particular. It's throughout New Jersey. But mostly, probably up here is how it's affecting because of the costs. So, but I certainly thank you. Do you have any questions, Dan? Mr. Wetzel?
I wish I had sewers.
Well,
All right?
thank you very much. And what I'll do is I will actually bring some of this information forward to the senator's office, so, and they can actually, hopefully maybe they'll act on it to try to
Okay.
have the DEP look into these regulations. Thank you.
All right.
Excuse
Thanks.
me, these are the DEP regulations. I mean, it's not a question of whether or not they're going to be it. I was given the information from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. That's all.
And they have the right to change it.
That's right, but
And that's what
I'm
needs to be
giving
done.
you what is currently in effect according to the state senator's office. Who do I believe, you or the state senator?
Well, it's certainly not the mortgage companies making the people replace their septics.
Well,
And let me
certainly, according to this, it's certainly not the township, and it's certainly not the state.
Yes, it is the state. The DEP is the state, and if you have to follow their regulations in order to sell your home, if your septic is not conforming and it's not passing, it is most definitely the state. They just all choose not to take responsibility for these regulations.
If you want to continue to bring in various differences in each individual sale, I'm sure you can find it. But the statement that was made to me is that on a perfectly functioning septic system, the state will not require you to install a new one. That's all I was told, and that's all I said. I don't know why you had to go through this big sham.
I didn't think it was a sham. I thought it was very educational to people. Like I said, sad. Next, we have our next presentation, Greener by Design. Mayor Shortway and Mr. Volker, if you could please introduce.
Mr. Fiore's going to address the council. Pretty much Greener by Design, we wish to have them educate us, and we are looking for them as far as open space advisors. Part of my platform, as you all know, when I was elected, was about the Greenway, the economic recovery, and the health and well-being of our community. Mr. Fiore, do you have anything to
Yeah, the Greenway Committee, Advisory Action Committee, Got another presentation from the Land Conservancy, which we were working with last year, and we got in touch with Greener by Design. They came in and did a presentation for the town council, the Greenway Committee, and told us what they can do in order to move some of the efforts that we're trying to make forward, looking at open space, looking at a property that we need in order to complete the Greenway. So I think everyone on the committee, was about 9 of us, were very impressed with what they had to say. They have excellent credentials, and I guess we'll just turn it over to them in order to do their presentation.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for those kind words. My name is Frank Pinto. This is Ben Spinelli and Bob Canase. Ben and I are principals of Greener by Design. We're equity partners in the company with 3 other gentlemen. The primary business of Greener by Design is an energy asset management company. Ben and I joined the company in January, where we had previously had our own LLC, Spinelli and Pinto Consulting, and our focus has been on municipal planning, open space, land conservation, working for both municipal, county, and private clients. But we since have moved over and merged our company in with Greener by Design and have brought them that whole platform. And we found it to be an excellent mix between our 2 companies. Most of what Greener by Design works in the urban counties, and what Ben and I do is mostly related in the rural counties. As you can see, this is our background for the 3 of us. We have a lot of extensive experience in the world of land preservation, land use planning, conservation. I worked for Morris County government for 25 years, and during that time, and why I left was to get back into doing land preservation work. Worked on preserving 100 farms in Morris County. Ben has extensive background at local, federal, and state levels of government, and as well as Bob, working in state government and managing several different conservation groups.
And working on septic systems.
Yeah. And you show the next slide, I think Bob shows the municipalities and governments that we're currently working with in various manners. Most of them are doing open space planning work, where we're looking at acquisitions, doing trail acquisitions. In particular, Randolph Township is a special project. We're preparing their trails master plan for Randolph Township. Roxbury is one that Bob has been the lead on, as well as Knowlton and Hardwick. And we're hired right now by Harding Township to work on a particular Green Acres diversion project. So we have a lot of different backgrounds that work well based on what a municipality's needs are. We're not here to dictate that this is, if you hire us, this is what you get. We're going to work with the town to figure out what exactly you need and how we can help you as a municipality.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ben Spinelli. I was the mayor of Chester Township in Morris County for 9 years. I did a lot of farmland and open space preservation jobs while I was there. When I look at the preservation of land, the conservation of land, whether it be outright acquisition of land for any of the number of reasons that it will assist the town, or whether it's for farmland preservation, every town's going to be different. You have to look at what the conditions are in your community, what your long-term goals are, and look at land conservation as a land use planning tool, and how it's going to help you meet your goals for what you want your town to look like for the future. One of the things that gets lost in this a lot is that when you look at how you're going to manage your town to be what you are, right? New Jersey is a very diverse state, right? From very urban to very rural, very different from the south to the north. 565 different municipalities. Everyone has its own characteristics. Figuring out what it is that your town represents in that puzzle, and then using land conservation as a tool to get to be what I'll say, the zen of planning, to be the best piece of the puzzle that you can be. And really looking at a township like Vernon, you've got a lot of assets here, and you've got to be realistic about what the future of the community really is going to be from where you are geographically, from the environmental constraints that you operate under, from the infrastructure constraints that you operate under, but not to look at those things as so much as impediments, but opportunities for where you want to be in the long term. You've got a great base of farmland here. You've got land that's available for recreation of all sorts, whether it be passive recreation or active recreation. You've got issues that you have to deal with in terms of density of your community, because certainly for water supply or for septic densities, open space acquisition can play a big role in managing the overall development of your town to make sure that you protect the water quality for the residents that are here. And to look at it as part of your economic opportunity for the future. We're currently working with Monmouth County and Warren County on looking at their agricultural resources for economic development reasons. A lot of times people who from the outside may look at farmland preservation as an open space tool. It's not. It's an economic development tool. It's a tool meant to preserve agriculture as an industry, to preserve agriculture as a viable part of the economy. And that's the work that we're doing with those two counties, which is to help them chart a future going forward where agriculture is going to be a big part of the productive economy of those counties. And I believe that you have that opportunity here in Vernon. The other thing is that you've got assets that people from the other parts of the state don't have. And you can look at it as a way of attracting visitors to your community, as a way of getting people to come here for any number of reasons, looking at Vernon as a four-season destination for people from other parts of the state. And then finally, looking at it, well, maybe most importantly, for the preservation of the quality of life of your residents. Why do people live here? All right, people live in Vernon for a reason. It's not because it's the most convenient town to New York City or to the job centers. It's not because of the nightlife, right? Vernon has a lot of beautiful assets that attract people to live here, that make them love living here, and trying to make sure that you take care of those assets for the long term is part of how you manage your open space objectives. No town. It's not like we're going to come and say, look, you've got to have a target of 1,000 acres of preserved land. There's no set number that's going to be the right number for you. What it's going to be is what's appropriate for you. After we sit down, go through a planning process, we would suggest reaching out to your residents and finding out what their needs and desires are for the long term, for their long-term vision of the community, and then coming up with a strategic plan and a means of implementing that plan over a very long period of time. Open space preservation really is a right foot, left foot process, where you do it, you plan, and then you implement that plan one property at a time. It might take 15 or 20 years to ultimately achieve your goals, but if you put it off for a year, it becomes a 21-year plan. If you put it off for 2 years, it becomes a 22-year plan. Looking at it from that aspect, I think is very important for the future of your community as well. For instance, just think about this. You've got the Appalachian Trail running through your community. Very few places in New Jersey does the Appalachian Trail actually go through an actual town. This is one of them. You have thousands of people every year who pass through your town probably unnoticed. To look at it as a potential economic driver by making it a destination. Damascus, Virginia, known as the friendliest town on the Appalachian Trail, has made a niche for itself as being a destination, a waypoint on the Appalachian Trail for people hiking from Georgia to Maine. That's just one possibility to look at in terms of economic development. The other is of course to look at the farm economy that you have, whether it be agritourism or promoting locally produced food and other means of turning it into a driver for your local economy, and to look at it that way. That's really our message, is to do what's appropriate for your community for the long term, not our view of what it might be. Certainly, we have some expertise that we bring from working in a diverse set of communities, where we could share with you the experiences that we have there and give you some guidance. But ultimately, it's your vision for the long-term health of your town.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add a few other thoughts is that we don't necessarily see open space as a static thing. It's an opportunity. It's not just a set aside. It's a way to offer amenities to the community that give people what they like. I mean, clearly, local food supply is a hot thing, right? There's nothing more hot than buy local and farm markets and so on and so forth. You're entirely on groundwater here. I'm a hydrogeologist, so I know the importance of open space to recharge to your well systems, whether they're community wells or individual wells. People want options near their homes. Dog parks are really popular, right? The Trust for Public Land, probably the biggest land conservation group in the nation, has a goal of everybody being within 10 minutes walking distance of a park. Vernon's a huge town. You've got a lot of diversity here. You certainly could find solutions within each part of the community. Open space is a place for community activity where people get together, whether it's gardens or a nonprofit event or a corporate event. It gives you an opportunity of having a place to stage things. I run a land trust, and we do events on our open space. They're very, very popular. And Ben hit on some of the things from an economic standpoint. Birders spend billions of dollars a year in New Jersey, right? There's a World Series of Birding. They come running to Vernon because of the diversity you have here. They come and they spend money. I thought this was interesting, team building, okay? Workers and so on and so forth. Several nonprofits do things with corporations to get them out of the office, working together, kind of a healthy environment in which to build teams. And more is popular for yoga outdoors and things of this nature. My land trust works with a lot of geocachers. They're always looking for a place to hide stuff and explore and so on and so forth. And last but not least, I think what Ben hit on it, is just maintaining something precious that you have that you can lose very quickly, your rural character, while bringing opportunities to the community. And I know the mayor has perhaps touched on some of these issues, is the economic benefits of open space. And there have been studies done, you've probably heard them. I found these to be the most interesting, that this is an older study by the Federal Fish and Wildlife Agency, that people spend $2.2 billion on wildlife recreation in New Jersey alone. You can go right down the line here. The U.S. Forest Service discovered that tourism is more valuable than their trees, which I found interesting too, than the leases they give. I know that the Greenway is really one of your core paradigm, your central theme here, and a number of cities have come back off of greenways. This one here, this example here at Tennessee River Park has brought hundreds of millions of dollars of private investment in downtown Chattanooga. You've got a central theme, a centralizing theme around which business can build. You saw that in Denver. You've seen it in San Antonio. You're seeing it in Newark. So the Greenway concept sort of is a unifying concept that can bring about prosperity, really. And there are other thoughts here as well about, Ben touched on quality of life. Where do people want to live? And quite frankly, open space has a proven positive effect on real estate value. A lot of people like to live near nature preserves. So what are we going to do for you? Okay, how do we bring this about? Our thoughts are to really sit down with you individually, speak to you on the phone. What does each council member think? I've found in working with my towns that sometimes in individual conversations, people have thoughts they might not bring out in a public forum. Let's hear what you think individually. Obviously, working with Mike and the various committees in town that are charged with looking at developing the Greenway and so forth. Ben touched on a community interest survey. What do people want? People in one part of the community might want one thing, those in another might want another thing. We could do this pretty simply through some of the internet tools that are out there. Let's hear from your citizens. And obviously, we're here to communicate with all the other groups that are involved in open space preservation and farmland preservation, like Sussex County Open Space Committee and the Ag Board, talking with the conservation groups that are out there, like the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the Trails Conference, Trust for Public Land, that does both parks and wilderness areas. Obviously, diving in and talking to the Greenway property owners, that's where our expertise comes into play. Finding the motivation of individual property owners and trying to make this fit together. It does something comprehensive that ties into the rest of your community, the downtown areas, and other opportunities. And look for money, right? You have a source of funding. There are other sources out there. The Highlands Council now has open space funds. County's beginning to have some again. I work for a foundation. I have connections in the foundation world. There are foundations that are funding acquisitions up here, like Victoria Foundation, that are funding open space for watershed protection. And environmental mitigation funds. There are ways to tap into penalties, essentially, that you could take advantage of for assets in your community. So that's kind of how we see things and what we think could be done. And I know you've been involved in open space preservation for a while, but we see it as more of a kind of a dynamic thing that plays into what else you want to see in your community, economic development, attracting people here, and really taking advantage of those who come here for, the assets that you have. So I guess we could end on, this is a view of Heaven Hill Farm, I think it's called. That's what Vernon, I found it very interesting. I looked at your logo. I said, boy, everything up in your logo, how you present your community is all open space, the Appalachian Trail farms and so forth. The picture's worth 1,000 words, but if you had any questions at this stage or any comments, we certainly would be open to that.
Thank you. Our council president has just been put on the county open space board. I'm a former farmer. I think, I'm not going to say you're a little late, but we're over 49% open space in agriculture. There are several issues, I think, that comes along with this, and one is maintenance. If you have a farmer, for instance, who has been raising corn on federal land or state land, and that farmer ages, and all of a sudden his kids don't want to do it anymore. The corn's been raised with herbicides. The minute that farmer leaves, that farm gets taken over by thistles. There's no program to take care of that. The thistles then end up going all the way up the valley and spreading. If you're in New York State, over the border from where my farm is, you can have a cedar borrowed from the Audubon Society. But in New Jersey, we don't have such a program. We need equipment.
There is one. Sea drill you can rent from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has one, the Audubon.
And where is that located?
Central Jersey. My land trust has used it here. in
And
Orange
that's
County.
what, a 3-hour trip to?
No. That can be taken anywhere in New Jersey. You can bring it.
It gets
to Vernon.
delivered?
Yes.
Well, we don't know about that up here.
Well, that's something that I've done. My land trust arranged that we seeded areas all over Sussex County.
But
Yes.
that also requires a management plan.
Yes.
So that these things can be taken care of. Should be agreements with all our open space that we have here, that farmers can lease the land.
Sorry, did you say can or can't?
Can. We
Can,
should have
good.
model agreements, model leases that are available, so we can have this partnership. Farmers should be encouraged to bring their markets to the supermarket. But usually the shelf cost for bringing a product to the supermarket is quite expensive, and that should be eased. I know ShopRite has a good program with that, and I think Acme has a small one. The whole issue of Jersey Fresh really hasn't succeeded. It's a nice program, but it really hasn't worked for the farmers. You need to also augment some kind of support with, for instance, the Hackettstown Auction House, so that stays alive, because that's a co-op, and sometimes they threaten to close it down. And that's one of the few sources the farmer has to get his product on the market. We need internship programs designed with the colleges, for instance, butcher programs, so that we have people coming into the industry who can work with the farmers. It's getting a little bit better if you work with local orchards and local markets, but certainly it could be made a lot easier for the farmer in terms of partnerships. And these are things that I look forward to.
There is a lot going on that front with the Food Shed Alliance out of Blairstown, who's working to establish a food hub, who's working with the state to modernize the Farm Link program, to bring young farmers to find land in places like Vernon. I've worked in my land trust with young people who are looking for land in Vernon. So there are programs that we could bring.
And it's very precious.
Yep.
We have farmers coming from Wantage to use our hay fields locally. That's a long way to bring a tractor and machinery.
Mr. Case, I have to say, Frank and I have been working on the Grow Warren program, where we've been interviewing farmers all over the county, and your comments are spot on. You know, it's you know, it was just like listening to one of our interviews. You know, the issues that you brought up. But those are, again, there's no overnight solution to that, but that's part of the long-term planning on how you can promote and preserve agriculture.
But we need a global view. For instance, a dipstick for a bulk tank costs $600 to come up and certify. That's ridiculous. We don't need that kind of certification. The manufacturer knows how many gallons of milk are put in that bulk tank, and that costs the farmer a lot. Just to pick up his milk is $32 a shipment every day. Those things need to be adjusted. It just seems to me it's a huge thing to work with. And we all have it right here, as you say, it's an asset. Thank you.
Councilmember Wetzel, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was at a conference this past week in Pennsylvania, and one of the guest speakers was a young lady who was in charge of the Heritage Commission and the Greenway Committee of Pennsylvania. And some of the things that they're doing in Pennsylvania are just mind-boggling with their tourists, with their trails, with their perceptiveness as to what's going on around them and how to take advantage of it. We're in the dark ages here. They're light years ahead of us with all the different programs that we have. And I would suggest one of the things, and if you want her name, I'll get her name for you. She was the head of the Heritage and the Greenway Committee, some of the things that they're doing, and it's outstanding. And we could do the same thing here. We could do the same thing here. We have all the assets. Now we have to put the plan together.
That's right.
To take advantage of it. I mean, the Appalachian Trail, you have fishing, you have hunting, you have hiking, you have all different historical sites that are great for a Heritage Committee and the Greenways.
And that's exactly right, Mr. Wetzel, and that's what we're trying to say, is understand what you have here and take full advantage of everything that's at your fingertips.
Pennsylvania is light years way ahead. She was very perceptive, very perceptive.
Councilmember Rizzuto?
The only concern that I have is about 70% of the township is restricted by virtue of the Highlands Act. Trying to convince people to dedicate any appreciable amount of money to accumulate additional open space when it's already been done by the state seems to be a matter of redundancy. Unless you're going to be able to assure us that you can gain much of this property by virtue of grants, I think it's something that the township and the people, the taxpayers, are going to say, why do we need it?
Well, Mr. Zug, it depends upon what the long-term purpose for the preservation transaction would be. If it's for acquisitions outright for recreational purposes, you know, the rules provide for payment through Green Acres and county funds and whatever other funds that are available to the property owner at pre-Highlands values, if they most of the time they'll qualify for it. So you get equity to the landowners where there's that public purpose. If it's for farmland preservation, it ensures that the land will remain in active agriculture in perpetuity and gets the landowner some value for the development rights that they're giving up. And again, even though those restrictions, the Highlands restrictions are in place, it's a means of getting some kind of equity into the hands of the landowners. But again, you have to have a strategic plan, it has to be well thought out, and it's got to be targeted for the purposes that you're looking for.
And it's not only a question of volume. Let me give you an example. My land trust manages a 360-acre preserve for the county, and we brought a 12-acre piece that allowed a trail to be completed around this lake. So a small piece of property opened up a recreational possibility. It's really well used now. So it's a matter of not only how much you have, where it is, and how it fits into what you're trying to do, whether it's a bikeway or a hiking trail or a dog park. We're not sitting here saying you need to add tons and tons more open space. I think we're saying look at what you have, how to make better use of it, and make some strategic acquisitions. Farmland, there are other opportunities. Recreation, there are other opportunities. Let's see what you have here that you can accentuate what you already have and build on. But, certainly people are sensitive to how much open space there is.
And to Mr. Cage's point, management and maintenance of the property for the long term has to be thought out as well.
What you have are individuals now trying to beat the Highlands. There is a proposed multi-acreage solar system that is going to apply to the Highlands for an exception to the rule to put up this field. And the gentleman who owns this field owns the subway, or the ferry line between New Jersey and New York. So he's going to have some pretty good lawyers talking to the Highland Lakes Commissioner.
And as far as the open space, our open space, approximately how much money do we have in our open space account right now?
I believe it's around 900,000.
Around 900,000. And it can only be used for,
Reservation.
for
Acquisition of farmland preservation.
farmland or any other
Acquisition,
open
not for
space?
maintenance or
Yeah,
stewardship.
right, we're quite different than the state law on that, but those are the only two things that are allowed by our ordinance when it was set up in 2000, 2001.
So and I'm not advocating for taking any more property off the tax rolls, I'll say that. But if we were to find a parcel that would work with the trail or, in order for a connector, would it be costing the taxpayers money if we used our open space fund?
Depends how much the land is, and we got to see where all the pieces are.
What I'm just saying is if we have $900,000 in our account and we were purchasing open space, small parcels, let's say, in order to acquire them maybe for easements to connect, would we be charging the taxpayers the money in our budget, let's say?
Oh, no, it's going to come out of the
Coming out
soft
of
costs,
open
come out of
space.
open space.
I'm asking on purpose, because I would not want people to think that if something was acquired, that it's
You have
coming.
a balance currently that you could take advantage of, and what we always try and do is leverage it against other available funds where possible, whether it's getting the land at a bargain, maybe the landowner can take advantage of a bargain sale, using some of the other sources we talked about. We always try and leverage what you have so that, you're not putting a burden on your taxpayers.
Well, I'm not advocating for purchasing more property, like I said, to take off the tax rolls, because somebody ends up having to pick up those tax dollars, and it ends up being the rest of us. But also, to that point, Mr. Kadish, when you sold your,
Development rights.
you went into farmland preservation, where did that money come from? Like, what entity?
It came from the federal and the state,
It came from federal state, so it
and
didn't
I
come
think
out
the
of...
county put in a little bit.
Did the town put in any money? So,
In general, municipalities are not required to participate in farmland preservation transactions.
But our fund was from a special tax that occurred for
but I'm
many
just,
years.
like I said, I'm asking these specifically because, just so people understand that money does come from other places, not just from our open space fund.
And the other thing with a farmland preservation transaction is the land doesn't come off the tax rolls. You still pay tax on the property. And so it's still privately owned, it's just restricted for the long-term use and to agricultural uses. So farmland preservation actually turns out to be a fairly net positive transaction for everyone involved.
And likewise, for trail connectivity, you may not want to purchase an entire property. You can purchase a conservation easement for, to enable public access, and it still keeps that property on the tax.
But there's still some problems with that.
Sure.
For instance, when the state wanted to buy an easement along the river so that fishermen could come in, I was still responsible for liability. I was still responsible for the fencing and several other issues. It just didn't pay for me to sell that easement.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are issues I think that really need to be addressed. Maintenance and funding for that maintenance.
And those are certainly issues we can help you with, because we've faced them before in other places. And
But even larger than that is an infrastructure to help support both these activities, the outdoor tourism and farming as well. Because that begins to disappear. And for us here in Vernon, the tourism infrastructure isn't there. We have this problem with the parking with the AT because it's so popular. It's very difficult to get people to move off the dime. We've been working 2 years on it.
Any other questions or comments from the council? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for giving us so much time.
Appreciate it.
May I have a motion to open the floor to public session?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the council?
Good evening, my name is Pat LaSorsa. I am a Barry Lakes homeowner and taxpayer since 1981, and I am a Great Gorge Village homeowner and taxpayer since 2006. I have 2 comments and 2 questions that I am hoping you can answer. The purchase of the sewers in Vernon was to benefit the entire town of Vernon. All the residents would benefit from the purchase and the expansion. And this was a decision by the council, the representatives, the mayor at that time. For reasons beyond the council's control, this benefit for the entire town of Vernon did not come to fruition. And now all of Vernon is not burdened by this expense, only the ratepayers. When it was a good thing, it was for all, but when it turned into a burden, it was placed only on a few. So my question on that comment is, does this council agree that the decision to purchase the sewer has created a burden on only the ratepayers? And if yes, what is the plan of this council to remedy this unjust in their decision to purchase the sewers that has on the ratepayers in Great Gorge Village? My second comment and question is, I was informed that our management company at Great Gorge Village provided all documentation to the town to show proof that Great Gorge Village does not and has never owned the lift station, yet the township moved forward to sue Great Gorge Village. My question on that is, was it a vote by this council to sue Great Gorge Village, and if so, why?
What I have to say is, much of this is under litigation, so I would have to defer to our attorney.
Yeah, the township's lawsuit speaks for itself, and I would ask that the council respect the attorney-client privilege and not comment further on why the lawsuit was filed.
And my other question? My first question as to why the burden is just on the ratepayers at this point, whereas when it was in the beginning, starting, it was to benefit the entire town.
Well, I'd have to say, actually, even with the sewer issue, that is actually also, there's some issues that are under litigation. But, and not knowing this, I'd actually say it was a little timely that that we had a presentation of septic systems, because what's happening are as Councilmember Wetzel said, he wished he were on sewers, because the people that are, the residents here that are not on sewers, if they have an issue, you know, they're expending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in order to remedy that. So, you know, unfortunately, there's different issues that happen to plague all of the residents in town. The sewers are an issue, but like I said, I mean, there's issues with the sewers that are, again, you know, in litigation. So.
I guess what I'm not understanding, when it was a benefit, it benefited everyone, and when it came, I don't want to say a flop, but didn't happen, well, you poor people that are already ratepayers on there, you're stuck with what our great plan was, it didn't come to fruition.
Are you speaking of when it was first implemented, let's say in the early 2000s, or when Great Gorge was brought into it in 2012?
In 2012, when we were brought into it.
Okay, well, that's,
I think you should understand that the initial sewer plans included Great Gorge Village. The growth, the potential growth in that area was based upon additional users being put online. And it was only this past year when Councilman Wetzel and Councilwoman Ohms and myself were able to get a resolution through that allowed the municipal utility authority in township to go ahead and explore potential areas for further development within the township. Very simply, we were looking to increase the denominator. The more users, the less of a cost to each individual user. Prior to the passage of that particular resolution, the township was being held hostage. The council at that time refused to have any further expansion studied. For what reason, I don't know. It only became a possibility when 3 council members began to propose the resolution to allow the study of possible expansions along various corridors within the township so that additional sewers could be entertained and possibly constructed. I agree with Mr. Wetzel. You know, having yourself put on a sewer is an increased benefit to your home, you know, because you don't have to worry about just what was talked about in the initial presentation about development of septics and having to replace them if you wanted to sell. But at this point, it's a matter going forward that the township is waiting to hear from the Vernon Township Municipal Utilities Authority to find out what possibly could be done.
If I may also add, in the early 2000s, Mountain Creek, then Intrawest, and then Andy Mulvihill himself was saying they were going to do further development. In March of 2015, Mr. Mulvihill addressed this council. They were going to build 1,500 more condominiums. By June of 2015, the Kaufmans took control of it. The development that was projected from the 2000s on did not occur. Now, some of it, yes, was from 2007, when we had the Great Recession, and this development didn't come. And with this help of this council, we hope by next year, we also need water in the town center. The town center properties will not develop if there's no public water. I know some are owned by public entities, the fire department's trying to sell to. The sewer lines are there, the water lines are there, but the pump stations down in Mountain Creek South have to be developed. They need another 400 gallons per minute. The Public Board of Utilities will not allow Suez to develop. We would have to act as the developer. The price tag on that is an estimated $3 million. So there's where we thought the town would prosper with new development, new tax revenue, a downtown center that people could go and shop and develop it. You can't have wastewater unless you have water. We currently have a Highlands Preservation that's doing a study on the water in the town. Do we have enough water to upgrade these wells? I think Suez only has another 100,000 allocations, and for this to work, they need 140,000 gallons per day of allocation. So a lot of the projections did not come. Back when I was on the council in 2010, 2011, we were told this system was going to operate in the black by $20,000 a year. It didn't happen, obviously. So it fell on the users without additional development, and that's what we're trying to do here is put these pieces of the puzzle together. What does Vernon have? What can Vernon offer so more people come in here, not only to live, but to develop the small mom and pop shops? And Mountain Creek is also part of this. We could have this farm ecology, the open space, and we could also have Mountain Creek here. I really believe this can work if we can get through this Chapter 11 with Mountain Creek. This will work. But that's what happened. We were promised development, and you go through all the minutes, you go all the way back from 2000 on, It never occurred.
Well, I do understand that, and the one word you used when you were speaking, we thought, and I understand that. I was all for development, but it was thought for everyone, didn't happen, so, I feel like we've just, as ratepayers, we've just been burdened. We thought we were helping everybody, but sorry, didn't work out, so you guys are stuck with it. That's kind of what
I
it
don't
sounds
want to
like.
speak with for the council, but I'm sure the council agrees with me. We are very sensitive to this.
Okay.
We are trying to find a solution. We realize the bills you're paying and how they're increasing, and we're trying to work together and find a solution for this.
That's what I needed to hear, thank you.
And I'd just like to go back to your question, which was it being fair for the rate users to pay, and how does everyone else in the town? And we do get to speak to a lot of the residents in town, and I can assure you, for the most part, residents in the town that are on septics do not feel that they should have to contribute to the sewer. As far as this expansion with this resolution for this expansion for this study, unless we end up having another Great Gorge Village built, it's not going to help. Adding on, 50 homes here or there, you still have to build the infrastructure.
That's right.
So what'll happen is you're just adding on more debt. So to think that there will be a miracle that will happen overnight, unless somebody really starts to build something substantial that will use sewer, it's not getting better anytime soon, with or without a proposed expansion study. And that's really where we're at with it. So,
Thank you for your time.
thank you. Thank you for coming.
Ma'am, you left your phone. Oh,
Is that some, what is it?
Remote.
Oh, a remote. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?
Good evening. Jamie Rickey, William James Rickey, Vernon, New Jersey. I did speak with the clerk. I had submitted a request to be added to the agenda at the end of last week, and I was informed by the clerk that those requests need to be in by Tuesday for the following Monday's meeting. So I did miss the deadline, and I wasn't able to get my request on the agenda, as I know the council prefers. Excuse me. As I think all of you know, that Rickey Farm has been deriving a pretty good portion of its income from event production through the temporary outdoor activity permit process. As I indicated in the letter, we made a decision at the end of the season last year to not allow alcoholic beverages at our public events any longer. I have come in with this request for a waiver prior. Clerk had actually done research. 2013, there was a waiver for the season given. In 2015, I asked for a waiver of one event, which was a nonprofit Cub Scout camporee event, which was granted, and then we were able to pay the taxes. The last several years, the event booking fees, the upfront booking fees, have allowed us to pay the taxes. Like I said, in that 2015 case, we were only received a waiver for one event, which was early in the season, and then we were paid the taxes, and we were averaging, I guess, 10 to 12 events a year. Significant drop in requests, and actually had events, not request to come back because of our decision to not have alcohol at the events any longer. So we've taken a hit this year. Also, as many of you may know, a lot of rumors out there. We've been experiencing hard financial times. My mom was evicted from her home almost a year ago. It took 8 months to get her back in her home, which I had always guaranteed her that I would keep her in her home no matter what, even if we had to sell the farm. So I have not been able to promote the venue as a, as a venue for families and those in recovery, and just for those who don't want to be in an alcohol-fueled environment. And I think that's a very underserved community. I've gotten a lot of positive response on that, but we haven't marketed to that new, market that we're looking for, the new type of events that we're looking to house, rather than the music festivals, which many of them are very much a party. We do have one event booked this year. They put their application in on time. I had told them that I would take care of, making sure they were aware ahead of time, as the zoning office made them aware, and so did I, that this would have to be done. So I've gotten to a point where I waited as long as I could because I didn't want to have to come in and ask. But I am here because the taxes aren't paid yet. We're about 1 year in arrears. So I had submitted a request. I believe that you all got a copy of my request, asking for a 90-day waiver of the requirement to have current tax status in order to have permits issued. So, so I'm here asking because we won't have time for another meeting before this one scheduled event, the first weekend in August. So I would ask for your grace for, our farm business, which is the oldest existing business in this township, 1769 established, prior to the Revolution. And all I can do is ask for your grace and mercy, really. And apologize that I have to even be here for this, but I want to make good on my word for the event that's booked, and would like to also have some opportunity to maybe book another event later in the year. We do have to submit these permits 60 days ahead, so there's only about 30, 40 days left that could be booked, before the weather gets too cold, considering the 60-day lead time for a permit application. So,
Just so the council's aware, Mr. Ricky contacted the clerk. It was Friday afternoon, so I just wanted to,
I wasn't aware that there was a deadline. I know that the agenda.
Well,
on the-
at that point, it's already even posted on the website and all, so,
Well,
but
no,
I just
actually,
wanted to let them know.
no, it was
that
not posted on the website, and the
Well,
agenda that was on the clerk.
It was sent,
I'm sorry.
it's
could I
sent to
ju-
the webmaster, but regardless, I just wanted to make them aware that it was Friday afternoon. And
It was, yes.
does anybody have any comments? Does the attorney have any comments on waivers?
No, the township code requires taxes to be paid. I understand that Mr. Ricky's made previous requests that have been granted, so it's the council's pleasure.
If the township code says that the taxes need to be waived, I know it's been done before, but are we allowed to just change the code? Go against it?
The code requires the taxes be paid. Traditionally, municipalities cannot waive the enforcement of their ordinances, but I understand that this body has a history and a practice of granting such a waiver. So it's really a matter of what does the governing body want to do? Do they want to enforce the code or grant another waiver?
Is there any comment from anyone?
The only thing I question is, if we do this again, are we opening up a can of worms now for other individuals? I don't know.
As far as changing the code?
As far as people coming forward and say, they can't pay their taxes. That's my only question.
Well, we paid our taxes for a couple hundred years. We certainly have been behind. We've only had one, if I'm correct, there's only been one time when we were in certificate status and we were able to redeem that. But other than that one time, we've always paid our taxes before sale.
Is there more, is there a mortgage on the place?
Well, on the large tract, there is, well, I'm not sure. There's a judgment lien from a former mortgage holder, but I would say that probably they do still, technically hold the mortgage, but there's also a judgment
I was
lien.
just wondering if if there was a mortgage and the taxes weren't paid, nobody, like, they're just unpaid?
Well, I mean, the taxes on our residents are paid. This is just the large farm tract. It's 1 year worth of taxes on the large farm tract of 67, I think it's 67 acres.
Jamie, do you own both the pieces, or does your aunt own the piece, or do you own both of them? Or does she own both
Well,
of them?
there's actually 3 residences on what would be the Ricky Farm, Ricky Farm and former Ricky Farm property, one of which was deeded to my aunt and uncle around 1980. That was just sold to another individual. That's kind of in the center of the farm. It's an 1.5 acre lot. My mom is on 2.5. She's closer to Maple Grange Road. I think you're familiar with her house. And I have the main farmhouse, which is on 5 acres. The surrounding property surrounding my mom's and the farmhouse is now in the ownership of the state of New Jersey. That was a purchase in 2000, I believe, by the state to enhance the trail corridor. And that's currently under agricultural lease. I initially had the agricultural lease, and then Bob Baldwin, and now his heirs.
So you are farm assessed on all these pieces of property?
Well, we had a question of the farmland assessment, and I did not provide the documentation, and the farmland assessment was pulled. So actually, we've been paying a higher tax rate for several years. We're in the process of reestablishing that farmland assessment, and we have been meeting the qualifications. And I have not caught back up with the tax assessor to check with her as to, when there's a time period to get back into the program. So no, we actually were out of the farmland assessment program, and actually paying slightly, paying a higher fee for that open land for several years now.
Are you doing any farming on it at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a majority of that farm tract that's hayed, and we're installing raised bed gardens now we've been doing quite a large composting operation for 20-some years, and we're starting to lay out some raised beds with that. Food production, actually, with the rise in food prices, food production is actually where we want to head back to, because it makes sense now. And, as gentlemen here, we're talking about, the food security. I'm sure you've all heard that term, local food, farm to table. It just makes sense now. Food production makes sense again. We have a lot of small producers in the area. I'm sure that you see the signs even popping up with small producers. Somebody was talking about butchers. I think that might have been Mr. Kadish. I mean, that's, we're really starting to produce. We have small niche farmers starting to meet the demands of what people are wanting. And actually we'd like to see, a historic farm district possibly here, really start to, I see a huge potential to, Nature's Organic Valley, or Organic Valley, whatever that is. That brand was actually created by a bunch of farmers that were near each other and just decided to make a brand. I mean, we have such a demographic so close to us, and people coming up here anyway. Tie into that market with a brand. We could come out of this valley in this area with a brand. Food production is really is a big part of the future, because people want local food now. I mean,
Mr. Ricky.
and these are the young people.
Mr. Ricky,
Yes, sir.
2000, June 8th, 2015, May 30th, 2013. 2 dates you came before the council and had the same request.
Yes, sir.
I remember sitting here and telling your mother that there was no way I was going to push her out of her home. And we extended that grant waiver on time. And you assured us that you had hoped you wouldn't have to come back again, and you were making every effort to make sure that you were taking care of business in that regard, in certain other areas with cell phone towers and so forth. Put yourself in our, we are the council, mayor is chief executive for the total township. Everybody who has a residence pays taxes in some form or another. The young lady that was here before you was quite concerned over her situation as regards to sewers, which are part of a tax. Now you're here before us again for a third time and asking us to waive it. There are people in town who make their living on land development, buildings, and they have every right to say to the council, why do you extend this waiver to this particular individual? Yet I have to have my taxes in on time. And I consider myself a business person, or a landowner, or a land developer, or simply a owner of a residence. You know, and I think once or twice, we can probably sell the fact that there was a lady who came before us who really had a tough time and was in a very, very difficult position. And I don't want to be accused of having a hard heart. And I don't think anybody else on this council did at that time as well. But I think you're putting us in a very, very onerous position. And that we have to make a decision once again. And I can only ask you, how do we know if this is going to happen again? At that time, you were talking about putting in events which would pay for itself. I can understand your change in philosophy. Unfortunately, with that change in philosophy goes, the consequences. Frankly, that's not the township's responsibility. You made the decision, you have to live with those consequences. I know you're going to get at least a 30-day grace period, and at some point, with your taxes, you're going to pay a modicum of interest. But as far as having the total bill waived for a period of time, I find it difficult to encourage fellow council people to accede to that request or even to go along with it. I just think we'd be opening up a Pandora's box on this. Once, twice, but 3 times, it's a lot. And then we have to look at the mayor when the situation is presented to him with another person, and he comes back and he says, council, you did it for one, why don't you do it for all? I find that very difficult to answer.
My only comments are just for others' benefits and so that it's not confused. I think you all understand that you're only waiving the requirement that the taxes be current in order to issue a permit. I'm not asking for any waiver of my taxes, just for the issuance of the permits to allow the events. And that,
We have
the reason that I'm here so late is I really did not want to have to ask you this again, because I remember having that conversation with you, sir. And you and I have always had a good relationship. And I did not want to be back here having to ask that and to have to look you in the face after I know what I had said to you then. And that's why I did wait, because I had hoped, I had things in motion to make a resolution without having to do this, and they did not come to fruition. And we have extenuating circumstances, but those are not your problems. And I guess I'll ask that, I'll still ask for the 90-day extension, or the 90-day waiver of that, so that I could have the possibility of other events. But as a, kind of as a minimum ask, I would ask that you allow this one event that is already waiting to have the permits issued. They're a really good group of kids. They were one of the easiest for the zoning department to work with. They were certainly one of the easiest I've ever worked with.
Excuse me, Mr. Ricky, unless the council, any of the council members are in favor of making a motion and proceeding,
Okay, well then.
we really do
Well, I'd ask
have
you,
to move on.
is there anyone who'd like to
Well, I'm just saying.
make a
this.
motion to,
Before the motion, Jamie, I've said this a couple, 3 times. I think your ace in the hole is the Appalachian Trail. I mean, you're located right there. I mean, I've talked to the mayor about this. I suggested $1 for parking, and the mayor said, no, $5 for parking so we can make some money. But I think that's a
But I don't have
moneymaker for
approval
you.
for
Using
paying
your
parking
farm
lot.
for parking, you get a cutoff from your hot dog man, and a little jitney bus to take these people back and forth. And
Have you approached any investors?
Gold mine.
Have you approached any investors? Like I said, it's difficult for it to fall back on, come back to us, because like, as Councilmember Rizzuto's, what do we do when everybody starts coming? That becomes an issue. But,
And Jamie, I'm very sensitive, and I've enjoyed the tours you've given me of the farm. But what do I say to all the people that have come in my office already in the last 18 months and asked for exceptions, and I have to follow the code? And I've said to them, no, there's no waiver, because that's what the law did. Now, what the council does, the council does. But you're putting this council and you're putting myself in such a sensitive position where I've already said no to people and events. And it could be from Mountain Creek to Legends to even senior citizens for different things if they want permits. And I said, I have to follow the
30
code.
days. Give them 30 days.
Not that.
I'll
Senior citizens?
make a motion to
My heart.
give Jamie a grace period of 30 days to try to get things straightened out.
is there anyone that wanted to second that? Okay. You-
Motion dies
No.
for lack of second.
What? I'm sorry?
Said motion dies for lack of second.
No, not yet. Knowing my associate, Mr. Wetzel, has a very, very hard heart. And he's making this because
A former student of mine, what can I say?
he's breaking mold. I'll second it. But the understanding is, I don't know, Jamie, I said this twice before. And you're gonna come, if you've done it twice, now it's the third time, it's gonna be a fourth time. But, it's on the floor, so let's go for a vote.
What I'd like to know is, if we were to pass this resolution, is there anything that we could actually put in the resolution? I mean, as far as, you're collecting the money, you'd be collecting money from this, and hopefully you'll be paying your taxes. I mean, how do we know you're going to be paying your taxes?
That's got to be in the resolution.
But-
The money from the event.
Well, that's what that's what I'm questioning is, it's one thing about giving the waiver, but if you're having this event and you're collecting money, will you then be actually paying the taxes?
I'm not having the event, I'm the venue
And you're
for
being
this
paid?
event. I am not the producer. I am being paid for the use of the property as the venue. I'm not producing the event.
So you have so the private
In fact,
entity
the
that's,
deposit for this event was actually paid with the security deposit that I wasn't able to provide back to them last year, and they forwarded that security deposit to this year's event. So there's not a whole lot on my side of this.
So
Certainly-
we're actually waiving, we would be waiving the permit, or the fact that you're not paying the taxes, we're waiving this, so actually someone else can come in and have an event and make money. But there wouldn't necessarily be money after the event. There's not necessarily money that you would be collecting, so you could actually pay off your taxes.
Well, I asked for a 90-day waiver so that I would have the opportunity. I have not really pursued a lot of events until I wanted to take care of this issue. I had events that were long-term events that did not come back. I would have had the tax money if the events that I've had in the past came back. My policy decision, one of them stayed in town, one of them went, to Toys Recreation.
Right, but I'm still just questioning, though, if this waiver is granted and you have the event, you're not necessarily collecting money so you can pay your taxes off, so you can.
Either way, I have to pay my taxes.
I understand either way, but this waiver is not helping you pay off your taxes, is that?
Just giving them time.
If the event is held on Saturday, Monday morning, you're not going to be coming to the tax office with the money to pay the taxes, because that money has already been expended.
Well, he's not the event, he's leasing.
And it was
Just
from a
leasing his
previous-
land.
It was from a previous year.
I have vending privileges at the event, which is an opportunity for us to possibly make money. You never know with outdoor events what it's going to be like. If it, it could be a total rainout. You never know. I can, say that whatever, I have at the time, I can come in, make partial payment with what funds I make, because there is an end for me, but the point was, it's not my event.
Yeah,
And that, deposits were made far ahead of time.
right. I would just have to say that for myself, that if I knew if this event was, there was a light at the end of the tunnel and you were actually being able to pay your taxes based on having this event,
Well, I'll be paying my taxes no matter what.
well, like I said, to me, the only person really making the money is the person that's holding the event, that's not you.
Well, I'll be in a position then I'll be, if I weren't granted a,
I think we just,
okay.
you have your motion and, yeah. So would there be anything specific in the resolution? Like, what would the resolution?
The resolution is proposed is that he has a 30-day waiver to apply for permits from the requirement that his taxes be paid, as I understand it.
Taxes be current, yeah.
But as he stated, the money from this event, there will not necessarily be money to pay the taxes.
Has to be.
Well, there's not. Mr. Ricky just said
Well,
that.
I'm going to need to pay my taxes sooner. They're going to go to tax sale. It's been a year, so.
But that's not the
I'm sure
issue.
They'll be scheduled for
The
sale.
issue is the permit.
Shortly. What's that?
That's not the issue. The issue is the permit.
Correct.
The law requires that you pay the taxes before you get a permit.
For the tax status needs to be current before the issuance of those
Correct.
permits.
But this event is not going to entail you to have the money to pay your taxes the day after the event.
Well, I'm working on a lot of things to pay the taxes.
Right, but that's-
This will,
that- I'm just
this will
saying
help, this will contribute in some way.
So that answer is no, Dick, just so you know. I guess. Roll it.
Lauren, can you take the roll?
Councilmember Kadesh?
No?
Councilmember Rizzuto?
No.
Councilmember Wetzel?
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy?
No.
Motion does not carry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address the council?
Sally Rinker, Vernon. Became a little obvious that there was no question Councilmember Murphy set up this septic discussion to try and challenge Mr. Rizzuto. Had very little to do with public information and taking up the time of a contractor. But anyway, I really came to make a comment about the last town council meeting of July 10th regarding ordinance 17-10 about the dog license fees, which was on the agenda for introduction. Not only was there concern and comments from the public regarding the fee, but there also seemed to be some uncertainty among some council members to introduce the ordinance as written. Councilwoman Ohms was exercising her right and duty as an elected official, voicing concern about some of the particulars in the ordinance. She was showing respect for the input from the public and expressed great concern for the implications of such a large fee of $700. I find it astounding that once again, Councilwoman Murphy exhibited not only her disrespect for public input, but thought it appropriate to chastise Councilwoman Ohms for wanting to postpone the ordinance. She basically accused Ms. Ohms of wasting money if the ordinance needed to be reintroduced, saying, "We pay for that every time." Thankfully, Sandy responded, "Well, we'll just have to redo it. We'll do the right decision." When an ordinance is voted to be introduced, yes, it's published in the newspaper at a cost. But in Murphy's eagerness to attack Ms. Ohms about cost, she failed to realize a tabled ordinance is not published in the paper, which means no cost. So what is the real problem here? As I see it, Ms. Murphy is so hyper-focused on pushing her own agendas, regardless of public input, and regardless of fellow council's input, that self-control is lost when her plans go awry. Let me remind you, Ms. Murphy, you are not a one-person council, and your actions clearly show you are not representing anyone but yourself. As chairperson of these meetings, it is not your place to bully and berate anyone who disagrees with you, but that is what you do.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?